Columbia Gorge, and hopefully you can all see why he's running. Ice Age floods waves about to get him. I give lots of talks to elementary kids, and I ask them what are they looking at, and they tell me that this is a tsunami. It's sort of a tsunami in reverse. It's going the wrong direction. But the reason I start with this is I think something like this probably put our mammoth where we found him now. It is a male. I'm going to refer to him as him if I do, don't think I'm being sexist. We looked a lot of bones to figure that out. And anyhow, uh, that's how this is how this animal got to us. Now, this is an image again that I borrowed. This is from the Hot Springs, South Dakota mammoth site. But this is a quick comparison to some of these animals that were around during the Ice Age. In particular, the Columbian mammoth here. Now, their scale here on the side is pretty good. Columbian mammoths often were in the neighborhood of 12, 13 feet tall. Ours, we've estimated the height of our animal by measuring the leg bones, and ours should be about 10.5 feet tall. But then he wasn't entirely done growing yet, so he might have gotten a little bit bigger. The African elephant, the big bush elephant, would be a bit smaller, a couple of tons lighter. Then comes the woolly. I like to think of woolies as kind of warm and cuddly. Uh, they're they're not what I think our culture and our media likes to tell us they are, the big behemoths. They really weren't the big boys of the day. In fact, both mammoths, all mammoths, closest relative is the Asian elephant, which is the small elephant today. Now, there is actually a rather distant cousin called a mastodon that did inhabit North America and Asia and Europe, actually right on up until the end of the Ice Age. And when I say that, I'm talking about the last glacial maximum, but that's what we're studying. And these guys went extinct about 10, 12,000 years ago, along with the woolies and the Columbi. They are built quite differently, but you'll notice all of these guys have funny looking noses. Those trunks then are kind of the hallmark of that order of animals. That it's way more than a species and a genus and a family that unites these guys. This one I'm just going to briefly mention, but he's my favorite, and that's the pygmy mammoth. I like to think of jumbo shrimp. That's kind of a oxymoron, I guess. But these guys actually, that's not a young one, that's an adult. Uh, I've been told that these types of animals, mammoths, can be rather plastic. That is, they can evolve fairly quickly. And pygmy mammoths apparently are the product of another species of mammoth that got stranded on an island as the glaciers were melting and sea level was rising. And as their habitat got more and more limited, there was a natural selection for the little ones to survive and reproduce. They could survive on less food. And so these guys would be up around maybe 4 or 5 feet tall, where they're almost identical relatives that were the ones that got out on the island were huge, were like twice that size. there were Columbian mammoth skeletons found on the Channel Islands off the coast of Southern California. Columbies, but they were itty bitty ones and adults. There were woolies, actually, these have been in the news in the last year, found up on Wrangell Island off the northern coast of Asia that survived until about 4,000 years ago. And they downsized, and the same thing happened to elephants in the Mediterranean. But that's just one of my favorite little things. So anyway, Columbies are the big boys for North America. They are also an animal that must have evolved here. We don't find their remains in Asia. Apparently, an ancestor, probably the steppe mammoth, crossed the Bering Land Bridge to Alaska and became Columbian mammoths maybe somewhere around 1 million years ago. Woolies showed up about 100,000 years ago, only one glaciation back. So these are kind of the newcomers. Now, a couple of things about how elephants and mammoths differ. The driver here is these big things. Tusks. Tusks are actually teeth, modified teeth. Notice it sticks out of the upper jaw. They have a trunk that puts food in their mouth, so they don't need things like incisors. And so these things are actually incisors. They were, if you go back into the fossil record. And the champion Columbian mammoth tusk, the biggest I know of, and we have a little demonstration thing in our dig house for tourists, measured 16 feet long. Teeth are very dense, and so that means this animal has a tremendous weight, hundreds of pounds of tooth sticking out the front of their face. So if they're going to be able to move their head around and use those tusks for anything, it's going to have a lot of muscle on the neck. So to accommodate the bigger muscle that's going to be grown in here generation after generation, they had to increase bone area for that muscle to attach to. So these guys grew these great big, what they're called as spinous processes, which basically means a growth that sticks out of the spine. This then gave them the muscle attachment that they need in the back, and then their skull changed shape, kind of as if it became, well, more flat, kind of nicely rounded here. And in the process to give it that big area for the muscle to attach here, the skull got tall. So if we go back and take a look at these guys, there's a Columbian mammoth skull, there's the woolly mammoth tall skull. If this guy would just kind of look at something on the ground a little bit, he'd have a nice flat back. They have African elephants have a bit of a sway back, but the top of their head and their rumps are right at the same level. Not so on mammoths. They're very high here. They have a hump where those spinous processes are. Look at the woolly, nice tall head. They kind of over exaggerated there a little bit, but their back slopes right on down to their tail because of that hump. Gives them a very different look. Look at the Asian right here. The closest relative to mammoths is that Asian. So these are things that evolved well after the species developed independently. Okay, by the way, that skeleton's known as Archie. He's on display at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. Uh, kind of a famous thing among mammoth lovers. I just threw this one in here because, one reason we know or we talk a lot about woolies and they're the ones that they make movies about and all that is because we know so much about them. And why we know so much about them is you can find them frozen in the permafrost. which is pretty easy to do these days because the permafrost is thawing. And here's just an example of some woolly mammoth hair. Apparently, their hair ranges from brunette to blonde and can even have some red in it, as you see here. But we know an awful lot more about what woolly mammoths should look like than Columbies because of the habitat that they lived in. Uh, we have bones. That's all we have. And as far as I know, that's just about all that science has. I've heard of some Columbian mammoth poop with they think it's poop with hair in it, but with nothing like this to be able to describe to an artist how that should be drawn or painted. Okay, moving along. Habitat I was just talking about. Here's your woolly. We find their remains basically in the green area in North America. Now, they're a European and an Asian critter. They were already woolly mammoths before they got to America. Columbies, as I suggested, must have evolved here from some other species, and it's thought that it's the steppe mammoth from Asia. In fact, the steppe mammoth is probably the ancestor of both of these. But the Columbi seems to have inhabited this green area here. The lower 48, some overlap happens. Don't figure that that's a nice solid boundary. When the ice melts back, you're going to find some Columbies moving north and vice versa with the woolies. But what I think is kind of interesting is this green does not go down far enough. I don't know if it's too dated or what, but Columbies have been found into Central America. You're not going to wear that kind of hair we just looked at and run around the coastal Panama or Costa Rica. It's just not going to be a habitat that they would like. Yet Columbies are found down there. In fact, the biggest find in terms of numbers of dead animals of Columbies that I know of is Mexico City. Initially, I heard that there were something like 150. I've since heard that there were about 600 that had died on the shores of a lake and been dug up quite accidentally, and I'll get to that in a little bit, because they were putting in an airport runway. Turns out they were on an old playa, used to be a lake. In fact, the most the best preserved parts of many of the mammoths is just their feet. Maybe they got stuck in the mud and that's why they're found there. But if you have this playa that's got water in it, today it's a playa, over enough years, you might lose one or two mammoths a year if there are herds passing. And you've got an awful large buildup there. It's not like a catastrophic event. Okay, now I'm going to jump around a little bit in this talk. I hope you hang on with me. But one of the things that people often want to know is how do we wind up there? How did this mammoth get discovered? And I guess what I have to say is it's just about like all of them do, by accident. Somebody's digging a hole. Paleontologists can go out finding dinosaurs by simply going out and find the right kind of rock and dig, and that's going to narrow it down. I don't know that that's possible with mammoths. It certainly wasn't with us. The property that our dig occupies is a part of a 22 acre, or no, I'm not sure it's 22, it's 20, about 26 or 7 acre parcel between two canyons. One of the canyons is Coyote Canyon. And the guy that owned the property about 25 years ago was selling dirt from the side of the canyon, excuse me, and selling it by the dump truck load for fill. And somehow I make up my own rumors once in a while, so I made this one up. Uh, some customer called him and said I didn't order any bones in my dirt. So the fellow that was doing the excavating went back to where he'd been digging in 2000. In the spring of 2000, he uncovered that thing in the black and white photograph. That is an upside down mammoth mandible, lower jaw. And the striped things you see on the inside of the jaw, that's the side of an elephant tooth or a mammoth tooth. And this is a piece of broken tooth here. Now, at that time, in 2000, I couldn't have told you that. I wouldn't have had a clue. But that photograph got circulated around somehow between 2008 and 2000. And by 2000, it got in the hands of a fellow who did know quite a bit about what that photograph represented, and that was Bax Barton, who I hope is listening in to this talk. He'll give me a critique, I'm sure. He and I are the two people that have been with this dig the longest. Anyway, Bax took a look at that. He says, "Well, I know what that is." So he grabbed he by the way, he was working at the Burke Museum at the University of Washington. And so he grabbed a grad student and sent him down to the Tri-Cities and says, you see if you can verify this and see if you can get high school kids involved. Let's use them for the labor force. So the guy came down here. If, as it turns out, if a kid went to lived on that property, they went to Kleinknecht High School here in Kennewick, and I taught at Kleinknecht High School for 35 years. And I wound up getting the phone number for the guy, called him back. We made a date for May of 2008. And these are three of my kids here. They're seniors about ready to graduate in May. And they were given pink flags and told to do a pedestrian search. Go look for these. Those are little bits of tusk. The front end loader met part of our mammoth for sure, and probably destroyed one, if not both tusks. Anyway, that told us where to dig, because where the flags got all clustered together up at one point on the hillside, we went there. X marks the spot, and right away we found the upper front leg bone, the humerus. However, we weren't allowed to come back. The guy in the yellow front end loader no longer owned the property, a bank did. And we had permission to be there for only one weekend. Well, a week later, I got a phone call. There's a wheat farmer up in the hills to the south of us that bought this piece of ground. He wanted the well. And then he found out that we had found a mammoth, or somebody had, and we wanted to dig it. He says, "Well, that's okay with me." He says, "Yeah, you guys can go ahead and do that. We use his building. We use his, two parking lots on the place. We use that for tourists. He has a well. We use his water. He pays the electricity. He pays the property taxes. We pay nothing." He says, "The only thing I want from you guys is that you share this with the community and especially school kids." Now, I think that's pretty neat. Ran into him the other day up there. He was repairing some damage on his well house building that a big wind did to us. Great guy. Okay, let's go to the floods now. All right. You guys are familiar with this. This is the recently put out map of the Northwest during the flood times by the Ice Age Floods Institute. Here we have the ice coming down from Canada. There's your ice dam, Glacial Lake Missoula. For most of the time, probably Glacial Lake Columbia is right here. And I want to dwell briefly on the Columbia Basin. A basin's a bowl. In this our sense, it's a geographic or a geologic feature. It's the bedrock is all lava. It's basalt. It came out about 17 to mostly around 15 million years ago. And it's very heavy. It's thickest right down in the lower, well, in the Lake Lewis region. And that probably caused some of the crust to sink. At the same time, we had some lifting going on. So what started out millions of years ago was a nice flat bunch of lava flows has been warped into a basin or a bowl. So, of course, we all know that water flows downhill. And I like to remind all the tourists from the local area right here in the Tri-Cities that, gosh, you know who lives downhill? Yeah, we're at the bottom of the bowl. Columbia River flows right down this way and it wants to go to Wallula Gap. That happens to be a crack in the bowl. Otherwise, we'd be kind of like the Great Basin with no outlet to the ocean. That crack allows it. So the water then comes out this way when the dam breaks, blowout, outburst flood, making those huge glaciers into floating icebergs. And the water can spill out quite readily over the upper rim right here of the Columbia Basin. This area is about 23 to 2,600 feet above sea level. The water had to get over that. Then it flows downhill toward Wallula Gap, which is only a little over 300 feet above sea level. At least that's the way it used to be. We have dams on the Columbia now that raise the water level. But point is that water had enough force and energy to rip out the scablands. Well, you guys probably already knew that. The important thing for this talk is that somebody already lived out there, and I don't know if it was people or not. I suspect there well could have been people that experienced some of the floods. We just don't have as solid of evidence as I think will eventually show up. But there were animals. There were mammoths. There were camels. There were horses. There were deer, probably elk, uh, maybe an occasional mastodon still, coyotes, badgers, rabbits, a lot of the stuff you see today. The water was flowing downhill at highway speeds. I'm talking hours, and it's down in the Wallula Gap area. And so anything out here has no way to escape. There just isn't time to on foot run to the edge of the bowl. They're going to get drowned. And I see that as a logical thing that happened to our mammoth. Now, with all that said, here's Wallula Gap. 800 feet of cliff right here on the Benton County side. The Walla Walla County hills are just as high. They eventually get even higher, but this side's been a little more eroded. Water backed up behind this gap that was not a big enough outlet for that huge lake. And, you know, we often think that, gee, you know, that water got clear up to the top of the cliffs. Well, no, it didn't. It went over the top. The current level of the lake, the man-made lake that we see here, is around 340 feet above sea level, according to the Corps of Engineers. The water would have reached close to about 1,250 feet above sea level. This would represent maybe 1,000 feet above sea level. So we have to add another 100 feet of water at the maximum. Well, hopefully we all know what coulees are. They're the ripped out courses where the water flowed over the scablands, where the basalts was sent downstream. Well, there are coulees right up here on top of uh, the cliffs that we're looking at, which is kind of awe-inspiring when you get up there and you're looking down and there's an obvious valley that was ripped out by water that got up there. And then you look over the edge and it's a long way down. Okay, Water backs up here then, creating Lake Lewis. This little blue streak right there is Coyote Canyon. And that's where, as the water backs up to Yakima and Walla Walla and up the Snake to Lewiston, in fact, it ponded clear up to Moses Lake. All this water at 1,200 and some feet above sea level was probably, I won't say full, but had a lot of dead bodies in it, including a particular mammoth that I know pretty well. And when the water goes down, that's when stuff that's floating in this temporary lake will wind up stranded on shorelines, including those icebergs that happen to be carrying rocks from up in North Idaho, because icebergs pick up a lot of debris. And if an iceberg runs aground, eventually it's going to melt, leaving behind whatever debris is in it, like erratic rocks. We'll visit a couple of them in a minute. If you've ever been over in this area, there's Badger Mountain. Badger Mountain's about 1,500 feet above sea level. That's about, what's that, 1,200 feet or so, 1,100 feet higher than the Columbia River right over here. Well, it was an island. And in fact, this whole thing right here, I'm not going to get into it, but if you're familiar with the Olympic Wallowa lineament, the owl, you're looking at it right here. And this whole chain of islands is part of it. And it would extend down to the southeast to the Wallowa Mountains. Okay, so the water then flows out here as it goes down. Well, our mammoth was found on that property. I mentioned camels a minute ago. We did find a camel bone on our property as well. It dated to about 25,000 years ago. And by the way, I haven't mentioned the age of our animal. Our animal radiocarbon dates to, this is calibrated, the more modern dates, to 17,449, plus or minus about 169 years. So we just rounded off at 17.5. That would correspond to some of the early floods, which makes sense because of the elevation where we are. The biggest floods would have gotten up to us. And just again, I'm not sure if everybody is as skookum as everybody else on the flood story, but the biggest floods are thought to be the early ones. So to be up at where we are in Badger Canyon, you've got to be a pretty big flood. Okay, now here's a map of our bone bed. This is a product of our documentation. We have laid out, in fact, we've surveyed the whole property, and then we've sub-surveyed it here so that we have 2 meter by 2 meter squares, just like archaeologists do. That's for mapping purposes. And we measure in then the location of each bone, each rock, anything of interest as we dig deeper. Now, this is a two-dimensional figure, and understand that these bones are not all at the same level. We'd have to do this and rotate a three-dimensional thing on your computer screen to give you the way it's really laid out. But this was, I don't have a date on this map, I don't think, but this was a few years before the pandemic hits when this was done. We have brought this unit down. This is XU3, Excavation Unit 3. Here is the first one we dug in, Excavation Unit 1, because the first bone we had evidence of is this one right here. And we learned pretty quickly that this was extending into this unit. So we have this unit mapped every 10 centimeters. We dig down 10 centimeters, about 4 inches, and we stop. We make a perfectly flat floor. We map everything, we photograph it, we give everything numbers before we lift it, and then we remove whatever has been totally exposed. Unfortunately, here, a lot of these bones, especially the ribs, are on the hillside at an angle. So only the top part of it will be exposed in the current level. We're going to leave that in place. We're going to map what's exposed on our map. Then we're going to dig down around it another 10 centimeters until we've completely exposed the bone, leaving a sort of pedestal under it to support the bone. Then we're going to take it out, and when we give it a number, we'll clean it up and preserve it. And then we put some on display, and we don't have enough display room. So we've got shelves with a number of them on too. Let's see. One other thing on here I want to mention is these gray items. Those are rocks. But you know, if they're not out of basalt, they don't belong here. They're foreign. They're North Idaho rocks. Mostly granodiorite, fairly common up there. I'll show you some more in a minute. We have since dug this unit down quite a bit. Right there, we haven't, at this point in time, when this map was current, we had not exposed all of this. There's quite a cluster of rocks right there. Just before the pandemic, 2019, we asked a high school kid that was working with us. She was a senior at Richland High School. We says, "Hey, do you think you can identify those rocks for us?" We helped her with the rock guide and whatnot. She got rock types, and then we says, "Now we want you to get some geologic maps and see if you can find out if there are outcrops up around Lake Pend Oreille of these kinds of rocks." She found. Now the next step would be do some chemistry. Make sure you found the mother rock. Well, we didn't go that far, but we did have her make a poster, and we got her lined up to present that poster at the GSA conference in Portland in 2019. At that point, she became a published scientist, and then she went off to college. So we've done that with a few kids, but back to the real reason for telling this. We have learned as we've dug down here that this isn't just a lone little cluster of rocks. It's a big cluster, something like this. And I've got a picture we'll take a peek at in a second. All right, what's next here? Yeah, here's a view looking straight on to the dig. Here are those bones that you were just looking at. There's our date right there. 17449. This is the shoulder blade, the scapula. Here's the humerus. And what I want to mention here, this is the depositional feature. These lines, these red lines, separate water deposited layers of dirt. This light color business is the top of one flood layer, or one lake bottom for Lake Lewis. If we could get up close, you would see that there's a layer of sand just above this white stuff. The white stuff is clay. It's very fine material. It's the last thing to settle out of water that's ponded. The sand is the big things. That's the stuff that's suspended in water and will fall out first, not counting the rocks. And then this is the used to be windblown soil that used to be up in the scablands. And then we have that next layer, which represents the top of this layer. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers. If we keep digging, we should be able to go down, I think, about 1.5 meters. One of the people that came down with the kids and the college archaeology team did a boring test, and said that we'd have to go down about another 1.5 meters before we hit rocks we can't get through. That could be bedrock, and I think it is, or I guess it could be a big erratic. This light material you see right here, that's floods deposits. It's kind of rubbly. It looks different than what's above this black line. That's because this is flood sediment. This is the stuff that's been there for 17 or 18, whatever the date is, 17,000 years. It's heavily calcified, calcium carbonate. It's nature's version of cement. It's hard to dig in. It's a dry climate type of deposit. You find it in the western US quite a lot, and we've got it right here. In fact, I've got some in my backyard. I had to put in 2 drain fields. Anyway, above it, this is windblown loess. This is the stuff of the Palouse Hills, that great wheat farming soil. Well, this has been laid down after this was laid here by the floods. And then at the top, we have some disturbed stuff that's called slope wash. And that's just a mixture of stuff. We treat this as the rest of it, but we don't expect to find um, any ancient bones in it because that, of course, is at the top of the pile and too recent. Okay, I mentioned that big rock pile. This is a kind of a close-up. I'm sorry we don't have a good uh, something in here like a north arrow or a tool to give you perspective on scale. But from the bottom of the picture to this wall here is about 1 meter. Okay, so that's pretty good chunk of debris. We've got, I think, some gneiss in here and some granodiorite. Those are both fairly common rocks up in the Lake Pend Oreille area where the ice dam was. Now, mention the layering, the floods layers. The Ice Age floods is their signatures are a whole bunch of erosional and depositional features. And here are some of the Lake Lewis depositional features. This is a shot of Burlingame Canyon in the Walla Walla Valley. It's hard to tell, but right about up here is a layer of Mount St. Helens set S ash. It's an ash couplet. It fell on this area about 15,000 years ago. So it would very obviously be at the top of this layer of flood sediments. Each of these layers represents one flood. And Richard Waite, back in the late 70s, I guess, interpreted these many layers, which, by the way, were accidentally eroded by the breakage of an irrigation canal. But he interpreted these as separate floods because you can't you can't dump the two couplet a couplet layer of ash is one layer, a little bit of sediment like windblown dirt on top of that, and then another layer. If Mount St. Helens blew its cork when a whole bunch of water was out here, and then it waited a while for some dirt to come in and blew its cork again, and then all that dirt settled out, that doesn't work. Uh, this only happens when there is time between these layers. And so we went from Bretz's original hypothesis of one great flood to later on buying maybe as five, and people kind of kicking around those small numbers. This is the thing that kind of opened it up. Hey, there's been lots of floods. There are 40 layers in Burlingame Canyon. And then about a decade later, uh, Dale, I just drew a blank. Sandpoil River, the ghost forests over on the West Coast, the tsunami.
Oh, you're talking Ryan Atwater?
I am talking. Thank you. Brian Atwater did a study up on the area that was Lake Columbia, and he came up with 89 layers showing that apparently the way he interpreted it, 89 times did glacial or did Glacial Lake Missoula spill into Lake Columbia. So at that point, we've got lots of floods. All right, well, here's the same darn feature on the other side of Lake Lewis. What we were just looking at is about 10 to 15 miles west of Walla Walla. This is about 15 miles east of Yakima, but its flood layers right there, I think you can see. Can you make out that little line right there, a little white line? It extends over here. That's Mount St. Helens. These again are depositional features from Lake Lewis. It's right by Interstate 90. The first slide I showed you here, you can't get on that property. I've been kicked off twice. I guess you can get on it, but you can't stay. But this you can see from your car as you drive right by it. If you can throw a rock out your window, you could hit it. Okay. It's a little blurry because I didn't want to stand on the freeway and take the picture, and I was kind of far away. Now, talking about erratics a little bit ago, this is my favorite erratic here. And by the way, that's Bruce Bjornstad standing on top. He's a local geologist that studies erratic rocks, and he's standing on a piece of granodiorite. He estimates it weighs in around 100 tons. And by the way, this is found at just a couple of 100 feet lower elevation than our Mammoth is, and it's about 2 to 3 miles to the west of our Mammoth in a neighboring canyon. All right, just a few other pictures here. Let me see how my time's doing. Hey, I'm doing pretty well. This is a view down. By the way, I mentioned we photograph. Uh, this was taken from a time when you walk up to the cliff here and put your toes right on the edge and have somebody grab your belt so you don't fall over, and then you hold the camera out and you take a picture down. This is Jan here holding a whiteboard where we have all the data that tells us which picture we're looking at, and this would be part of unit 1 before we get all the way down there, I think. Anyway, we now have poles that we put cameras on so we can be a lot safer. Here is another view. This is Bax, our research director. He's standing next to that front leg bone that was our first big find, the shoulder blade. There's one of the vertebrae, and that great big spike is extending back into the hillside. We've since brought this unit down and have freed that bone right there. This was covered very neatly so that this wall was nice and smooth at one time. And then after a winter or two of erosion, the dirt flaked off right here, about a 1/4 inch of dirt. And we had to leave this exposed to the elements for a while because we can't just go in and pull it out. That's called quarrying. That we're not here just to get the bones out. They're the cool thing that brought us here, but we're trying to document this in a properly scientific manner. So you start at the top and you dig all the way down, level by level, documenting, and it takes years. This is the scapula that is right here. It's been put in a plaster cast. I really like the idea of the handles here because when you flip this over, you can carry it like a stretcher. And we are now ready to mount the actual bone, which has been freed from its plaster cast. And then here we're just cleaning that up. Let's see, what else do we have? Okay. Well, shift gears again. I just said that we're not quarrying the bone, we're studying not only the relationship of one bone to another and to the rocks, but there's a whole lot of other things that have lived in this area and they're dead, buried in the soil too. And they have a story to tell. So we take 100% of the dirt that we excavate, level by level, except for one 10 by 10 by 10 centimeter cube that we save out for a soil sample. And all the rest of the dirt from a level is washed over 1 millimeter screen. Now, what we're using over here that these ladies are using, the framework is just it's your regular everyday archaeological dry screen. Uh, it's got a wire mesh on the bottom. We took the legs off and we set them on top of these big watering troughs. These are for livestock. We got a good deal on them from a feed place. And we hold them down with bungee cords. We have laid on 1 millimeter screen, think window screens. We've stapled those onto the board framework. Then we take another screen and lay it on top and then hold it in with clamps. That's because we want to be able to lift the top screen out and bring it over here and let the stuff dry. But these gals are washing. That gets rid of all the fine dirt, and mostly sand is left behind. But you know, there are little bones of squirrels and mice, the occasional bird. There are bug parts. There are seeds from plants. And all that's taken over here. It's folded into a kind of envelope and weighted down with rocks. Imagine we have rocks. Gets all dried. The hotter the summer day, the better, because then it gets dried real fast. These are emptied into a baggie with the FS number. Remember, I said everything gets numbered. The layer gets numbered, and those then go into the baggie with the number for that layer, and they then go to this. This is our microphotography lab. And this lady is taking pictures right here on the stage. These squares are 1 millimeter on a side. And this is just a grab bag of some of the stuff that we've rescued. There's a little wing, could be thousands of years old, I don't know, but that could fit on a fly or a bee. There's a seed of some sort. There's, of course, a ladybug. That's the big example. This is a vertebra from a mouse, I'm told. There's a snake vertebra. There's a beetle's wing cover. There's a mouse claw. There's a mouse molar. There's some other rodent tooth, flower, seeds, and my favorite's a cute little ant head. Now, what do we do with these? These guys are going to tell us how the environment changed since North Idaho had an ice dam. If we could go, well, we're already down to 17,500 years ago, and we've kept records of what came out of which layer. So once we complete the dig, we can sacrifice some of our specimens here that we have multiple specimens of, do radiocarbon dates on them, and we can find out their age. If they lived in the Columbia Basin at a particular age, we can infer what the environment was like based on who was living here or who wasn't living here at a particular time and who left the area, because we can't find any of them. To our knowledge, nobody's done that over here. And this is certainly by no means going to be the end all of this, but hopefully it can push some people to go out and study the floods deposits and see if they can add to our body of knowledge of what's lived here in the past. Now, another little tidbit. That's our big leg bone, our big humerus. That's sort of our prize show-off toy. One of our volunteers came to us about 10 years ago, and he was getting interested in 3D printing. And one way to get data to print models of stuff is to run your original item through a CAT scan, a CT scan machine. So he called Cadillac Hospital. That's one of the local hospitals here in the Tri-Cities, and asked if he could run his mammoth bones through their machine. And they says, I don't know. Nobody ever asked. So they went and asked, called him back, says, yeah, bring him in. So he brought in a bunch of our bones. We've done this several times now. In fact, we don't even go clear to Richland to get to this hospital. The local cancer center in Kennewick heard about what we were doing and invited us to come over there. So they run this through, they give the data to Neil. Neil translates it to whatever the 3D scanner or 3D printer needs, and he then can spit out bones like this. By the way, this little Brock framework back here is a 3D printer. This bone is much larger than that, even though the scale's kind of odd here. This bone was printed in 6 pieces. He glued them together. And then this lady, whose job at the time happened to be carrying buckets of dirt between the dig and the wet screen, she says, well, that's a white bone, but our bones aren't really white. I can color that for you. I'm an artist. We didn't know that. So she spent the winter of 2020 and 2021 up at our dig house. By the way, this building was intended to be a machine shop. When we got here, there was a wood burning stove in it. That's all the HVAC there was. And so she spent the winter up here off and on with Megan, teaching her how to do this. Right here, they have a wood burning tool where they're texturing the shoulder end down up here. And this is I don't know if you call it the knee or the elbow, but this is the other end of the humerus. And once they got it textured properly, then they painted it to match this bone. And when that thing was brand new, and in fact, even now, it's very difficult to tell the difference between her bones. She did a fabulous job. We have taken quite a number of our bones there and we carry them out to events we go to. Uh, we do a lot of STEM nights at schools and other events. And kids, yeah, we're fulfilling our mandate from the property owner. These are some Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts, I should say. And these are it's the class of kids that came out. This is a tusk that somebody gave us. I think it came from the Yakima Museum. It was not treated the way we treat our stuff. That is, it was not properly documented. So there are no records of it. We don't know where it came from. So I use this as a good, bad example when I'm telling people about all the documentation that needs to happen. This is something that didn't get it. Yes, it's a tusk, but that's all I can tell you. This little guy, we let the kids wash. We let them wash dirt. Now we manufacture some dirt for them and we make sure there's some goodies in there for them to find. This little guy has found a leg bone and a rib from some unfortunate animal that he found in the wet screen there. Now we don't let our workers sort through the wet screen. That's supposed to be under magnification. But what the heck? Kids gotta have something fun to do. Here's a young lady then that's learning how to do that in our lab. And here are some kids that they come out to us and they get to see slides. This is some kids, of course, down at the dig site, and I really like this group and these as well. Notice the kids have the little hats on, little crowns. Teacher had them write their name on their forehead. And when you're lecturing to a bunch of elementary kids, it's nice to be able to call them by name. As we're winding down here, this is just a shot of our group at work, of our crew. This was taken out of the windshield of my old pickup last summer. We do some work on the back of our backside, and a lot of it's done on knees. And little people are at a premium out here. We don't hire them. Well, by the way, I didn't mention, we're all volunteers. Yeah. Nobody gets paid for this. All the money we take in goes directly to our bank account so that we can buy equipment and pay for radiocarbon dates. Before the pandemic, they were going about $700 a pop. I think they're probably recovered some in their price, but we've got, well, we've come down over 3 meters. So if we're going to get radiocarbon dates for some of these items for every layer, that's a couple tens of thousands of dollars at least. So that's where our money goes. Oh, this is at Coyote Canyon. We have cameras, and this was snapped late one night after dark, and there's our coyote friend. And let's see, what do I have next? Oh, yeah. I was talking about erratics a little bit ago. This is a traffic circle in West Kennewick. I used to take this route, come right down this road to go to work for many years. And then they messed up the intersection where I would drive and they put in this traffic thing. And so I would go by there every now and then and look, see what they're doing. These rocks were all buried right here. And they had their heavy equipment out and they pushed them off to the side. And I said, God, those are erratics, man. Those belong up in North Idaho. And you just ruined them by shoving them off to the side. So I tried to get a hold of people in the city of Kennewick and I didn't do any good. But somebody had the what withal or wherewithal to put those out in the middle as decorations. And so now we have a nice example of erratics that people drive around every day. And I'm done. There's my artist friend, Stev Ominski, being overrun by his monster. That's it, Dale.